It was a quiet afternoon in the small suburban neighborhood of Mapleview, the kind of calm where you could hear the leaves whisper against the windows and the distant laughter of children biking down the hill. But amid that stillness, I heard something that made my heart stop, a sound so fragile, so broken, it sliced through the air like glass. It was the sound of someone crying, soft at first, then muffled sobs, coming from the apartment next door. If you believe that small acts of kindness can change lives, that second chances still matter in this world, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Touch of Kindness, because this story is proof that compassion can turn pain into something beautiful. I had only moved into that building 3 weeks earlier. My name is Ethan Ward, 35 years old, a freelance photographer trying to rebuild his life after a year that nearly broke him. My marriage had ended abruptly when my wife left, taking with her not only our shared dreams but also my confidence, my sense of direction. I thought a new city, a new apartment might be the reset button I needed. But even surrounded by blank walls and unopened boxes, loneliness had a sound, an echo that filled the nights. Until that day when I heard her crying. At first I hesitated. You never know whether to interfere in someone else's pain. Maybe she wanted to be alone. Maybe it wasn't my place. But as the minutes dragged on, her sobs turned desperate, almost gasping. Something inside me snapped, the kind of instinct that doesn't ask for permission. I walked to the wall, pressed my ear gently, and realized it wasn't just crying. There were soft words between sobs, a name being whispered. Liam, please, Liam. It was a mother's voice. Without thinking twice, I stepped outside, crossed the small hallway, and knocked on her door. There was no response. I knocked again, softer this time. The door creaked open slightly, revealing a dimly lit apartment that smelled faintly of baby lotion and coffee. Standing there was a young woman, late 20s maybe, with tired eyes and tear-streaked cheeks. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her oversized sweater hung loosely from her frame. I'm sorry, I said carefully. I heard someone crying. Are you okay? For a moment she looked startled, like a deer caught in headlights. Then her eyes softened with a mixture of embarrassment and exhaustion. I'm fine, she murmured, wiping her face quickly. I didn't mean to disturb anyone. But she wasn't fine. I could see that. Behind her on the small couch was a collection of baby toys and a framed photo of a man in a soldier's uniform. I didn't push further. I just nodded, said, if you ever need anything. I'm right next door. She nodded, thanked me quietly, and closed the door. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. The loneliness in it mirrored something I knew too well. The next morning, I made 2 cups of coffee, hesitated for 5 minutes, then took one and left it at her doorstep with a small note. For a better morning. Ethan, next door. When I returned home that evening, the cup was gone, but under my doormat there was a folded napkin with 2 words scribbled in delicate handwriting, thank you. Days turned into weeks. I'd sometimes see her through the hallway window, pushing a stroller, her eyes still heavy but her steps determined. Her name, I learned later, was Clara Jennings. Her husband, Liam, had been deployed overseas but never came home. The photo on her shelf wasn't just a memory. It was her world frozen in time. She had a little boy, about 3 years old, named Noah. I began helping her with small things, carrying groceries, fixing a squeaky door hinge, lending my camera when she mentioned wanting to take pictures of Noah. She smiled more often now, small, shy smiles that carried both gratitude and sadness. And for the first time in a long while, my apartment didn't feel like a void anymore. One Saturday, the city was bathed in golden sunlight. Clara knocked on my door unexpectedly, holding a small plastic container. Blueberry muffins, she said, smiling awkwardly. I thought I'd say thank you properly. I invited her in. She looked around my half-finished apartment, the bare walls still waiting for life to be hung on them. She pointed at one of my photos, a landscape shot of an old lighthouse surrounded by waves. You took this? She asked. I nodded. She stared for a moment, her voice quiet. It looks like it's been standing alone forever, but somehow still holding on. That sentence stayed with me. Maybe she wasn't just describing the lighthouse, maybe she was describing herself. Over the next few months, Clara and Noah became part of my days. We'd share breakfast on the porch or go for walks to the park. Noah loved holding my camera and pretending to take photos, his laughter echoing through the trees. For someone who had once believed his world was over, I was starting to see color again. But happiness, especially fragile happiness, has a way of testing you. One afternoon, I returned from a photography job to find Clara sitting on the curb outside her building, her head buried in her hands. The stroller was beside her, Noah asleep. She had received a letter, final confirmation that her husband's body had been recovered overseas. The closure she'd waited for years had finally come, but it broke her all over again. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to live without him," she whispered. I sat beside her, not saying anything. Sometimes words can't fix pain, they can only stand beside it. I just placed my hand gently over hers. The silence between us said what words couldn't. That night I didn't go back to my apartment. I stayed. I made tea, listened as she spoke about Liam, their dreams, his laugh, the last phone call they had before he left. Her voice cracked at every memory, but slowly her breath steadied. The next morning, sunlight poured through her window, washing the room in a calm gold. Noah woke up and toddled over to her, climbing into her lap. Clara looked at him, then at me, and for the first time since I'd met her, she smiled. Not the polite kind, but the kind that comes after surviving the storm. Months passed. I watched her rebuild piece by piece. She started baking again, took up painting, even applied for a part-time job at a local daycare. The woman who once cried through the walls was now laughing with her son in the hallway. And somewhere along the way, without realizing it, my heart began to change too. I fought it at first. I didn't want to fall for someone still healing, someone who had already lost so much. But love doesn't always wait for perfect timing. It grows quietly, in moments of shared silence, in the comfort of simply being there. One evening, we were sitting on the front steps, watching Noah draw chalk hearts on the pavement. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and lavender. Clara turned to me and said softly, "You know, I used to hate sunsets. They reminded me of endings, but now they look like new beginnings." Something in me broke open then, the last wall I'd been holding up. "Clara," I said quietly, "you don't have to face every sunset alone anymore." She looked at me, tears in her eyes, not of sadness this time, but of recognition. She didn't answer. She just leaned her head on my shoulder, and we watched the sky fade together. That night, when I closed my eyes, I realized the crying that had once haunted the walls had led me here, to a life that felt whole again. 6 months later, Clara's apartment no longer echoed with silence. There was laughter, music, and the scent of fresh muffins. She had framed some of my photographs and hung them in her living room, saying they made the place feel alive. And every morning I'd knock on her door, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because kindness, once given, had come. Full circle. Looking back now, I think about that first day, the sound of her crying, the hesitation before I knocked, and the moment that changed everything. Sometimes the smallest act of courage is simply choosing to care, and that choice can rewrite not only someone else's story, but your own. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Touch of Kindness, so more people can remember that even one kind gesture can save a soul from breaking. Special request: before you scroll away, comment below "Kindness still exists," to remind the world that hope always begins with one person who chooses to listen.